Okay, so today I just wanted to take that time to perform that pivot I was talking about and just talk about something that I've been just kind of stewing over for a bit. Um and that is the topic of being an outlier and and the wounds that are created from being an outlier and the steps that you can take to kind of heal from those outlier wounds. And I think that there's a core set of wounds that all outliers are subject to that we all experience. So I'm going to talk about those core wounds, and I might talk about some more specific wounds, but yeah, I'm just going to do a little bit of a general video, and this one won't be too long. But I just wanted to really talk about really talk about this topic. So outliers. In the description, you'll see below me talking about how the concept of an outlier in statistics is kind of just in statistics, the outliers are treated as these pesky little nuisances that need to be removed. Whenever you're trying to tell a story with data, you want to part of cleaning up data, getting it nice and clean, is to remove the outliers because they just kind of skew your results. And they skew the results because they just don't follow the trend. They don't follow the pattern. They don't paint the picture that you're getting. They don't just fit. They don't fit the frame. They don't fit the frame. The frame that you're placing over the picture that you're drawing. So if you're ever taking a stats class, if you're part of data analytics or anything like that, you're taught how to handle outliers, and one of the ways for handling them is removing them. Now in life, when you are as a person are an outlier, um, unfortunately, life kind of treats you the same way that an analyst might treat an outlier in a graph. Life tries to just life can be well. It's also twofold, and I want to talk about the aspect of being an outlier in terms of performance and an outlier in terms of just being. Um, uh, and sometimes, not many cases. Actually, I think it's not in that many cases, but in a few cases, being an outlier in terms of being and performance, those things just go hand in hand. And the fact that you are an outlier in terms of performance, it kind of what's what I'm looking for? It kind of redeems you of your outlyingness that comes from you who you are as a being. So yeah, so like say if when back in the day, when I used to not have that many black people, or still don't, but when you don't have that many black people in certain positions, um and then a black person gets into that role, and it's like, oh, there goes that Negro right there, that one's an outlier. Yeah, he might be black, but he's really smart. He's smart for a Negro. That's what that term of, oh, you're this for that. You're smart for a Negro. You're funny for a girl. You're you're this for that. Um, it's just all the ways that just people trying to say, hey, you're an outlier. You're an outlier for whatever group that you're associated with. Um, Now, oftentimes, the reason that those statements can be pretty offensive when you're talking about people, is because outliers for their groups, they tend to recognize the other outliers in the group, and this is what I mean by outliers in terms of skill and outliers in terms of being, and how when you're an outlier in terms of skills, that can kind of redeem you for whatever your outlier in terms of being is. It's just redemptive. But we know about all these other outliers that maybe don't have the skill, but they're just an outlier in terms of being, and they still aren't given any of that redemption that comes from making money. And I want to, in my other videos, I always talk about how at the end of the day, it doesn't matter in this world. As long as who you are or what you are brings in income, it's just fine. But once whatever it is that you're doing, if it's not bringing in income, it's not fine. And there are just some issues or wounds that can be created when you're an outlier from being, but not necessarily in terms of performance and things like that. And maybe you were at one point in time on the track to being an outlier in terms of performance and things like that. But because people couldn't overlook your beingness, your outlier for your being, then you got punched down and you got trampled over, and you got, and this is where the whole outlier wounds start to come in again. And you were never even given the opportunity to heal and move on, or work with those wounds, because in the with this video channel, we talk about gang stalking and things like that, and how for many of us it starts when we're pretty young. Like for me, it started when I was 20, which is really, really young. And I just wanted to kind of talk about how that affects things as well, because unfortunately, when you're an outlier, and then as an outlier, all your life you've kind of been a target for gang attacks and things like that. But gang stalking is just another level of that, that not all outliers necessarily receive. But at the end of the day, it's something that can hinder your growth, um, like really, really, really rupture your path. And of course, it's a very unusual form of abuse. It's a very unusual challenge to have in life. It's very extremely unusual. Although it happens to, hundreds of thousands and millions of people, at the end of the day, that's still, even if it happened to only 1% of the population, that's still 100,000. That's a lot of people. Um, but but yeah, so let's just get into the core outlier wounds. So if you are an outlier, in terms of beingness or in terms of performance or both, um, oftentimes you have a wound of being misunderstood. That's just that's a pretty commonplace one. Um, yeah, being an outlier, being not like the crowd, not following trends in any way, it just kind of makes you misunderstood. So there's that. Perpetual rejection. Uh, and this is, if you're a guy, it'll take on a different it might take on a different meaning if you're a woman. But what I mean by rejection is just you never fit in with any groups. Um and sometimes you recognize this and you learn to navigate all groups. Kind of like taking on like a chameleon personality type, or a chameleon, um not a chameleon personality type, because it's not being a chameleon isn't a personality type. It's just it's a social function. It's a tool. It's just an element. Like aren't chameleons, while they are known for their ability to blend in with whatever environment they're in, and that's a tool that they use for survival. At the end of the day, what a chameleon is still more than that. It's still more than just that tool for survival. And when you're an outlier, being a chameleon is just a tool for survival. It's not necessarily something that defines you. It's not a personality trait. It's just a tool. Because as a human being, we all want to fit in. We all want to socialize. We all want to be part of something greater than ourselves. And when you're different, it's just hard to really to be part of a whole. And um, and that chameleon, those chameleon tools, they work as a way to supplement, um, and support your differentness, but still allow you to be part of a whole. But they're not your personality, it's just a tool. Another core outlier wound is gang attacks. When you were younger, you were probably subject to lots of group bullying, group harassment, being ganged up on. Probably, had groups of girls trying to fight you and shit like that. Just being an outlier just makes you a target. And then I want to talk about a few other things. Because despite the fact that being an outlier makes you very noticeable or a target, it incites very extreme emotions in people. Um, and actually, that brings me to my next point anyway. Inciting extremes in people. When you are an outlier, something that you'll quickly find out is that people either love you or they hate you. Very rarely are people mixed or ambivalent in their or at least if they are, you rarely they're very, you don't never get to interact with them. That's the thing about people who are ambivalent about things or they don't care about things. You don't really get to hear their voices. um but when people really love something or they really hate something, they tend to express that. And as an outlier, you have had many experiences of just inciting extreme emotions in people. And oftentimes simultaneously, like someone will love you and hate you. Like they'll hate the fact that you incite love in them. They'll just hate that shit. They'll hate that you incite admiration in them. Like they just for some reason the effect you have on people is just that you incite extremes in them. Um, and you're probably someone who, because of that, you've come to value um, more balanced or, yeah, just more balanced interactions. But that's just not your, it's just not what's coming to you. Like for some reason, you just don't get balance in life. You never do. You either get all or you get nothing. Life is just like that for you when you're an outlier. You just incite these extremes in people. And then due to that, the tales. When you're an outlier, you're the stuff that movies are made out of. You're the stuff that stories are made up of. You're the outliers are especially if they don't have the people that are outliers in terms of being, but not necessarily in terms of performance. Because like I said, people are outliers in terms of performance. The group tends to just kind of suck them in because hey, at least they're useful, at least they. But when you're an outlier in terms of just being, you're the stuff that people just the stuff that stories are made up of. You're just interesting. You're just perfect gossip material. Yeah, you're just those old tales, of this and that, of Hansel and Gretel and Jack and Jill. You're those stories probably, like they're probably just little side notes of outliers. You're the stuff that movies are made up of. You're the stuff that TV shows are made up of. It's like you're the prototype for these characters and things like that. And man, do people love to tell stories about you. Like stories about you just travel. Now, as an outlier, you probably learn to stay low key. You probably learn to hone your chameleon toolkit very well. But in life, what happens when an outlier becomes revealed? Um, even if you're an outlier, that's another thing. If you're an outlier in terms of performance, you more than likely have really learned to blend in because you found a way to get acceptance and things like that from the group. And you don't want to lose that, so you try to mask whatever your being is, because yeah, it's like, oh gosh, I'm finally not an outlier, or I'm an outlier for good reason. Let me not do anything to fuck this up. And some people, they tend to, after some time, they'll reveal, more of their outlier, traits of being. Um, these outliers of performance, they'll go ahead and, maybe Frank Ocean, he was a great singer and all that, and a great artist, but you didn't find out he was gay until later because of, just the environment. Excuse me, just the hostility that people can have towards people who just don't fit whatever molds, um, don't fit whatever narratives in society that people have made up about how human beings are and things like that. Um, so yeah, just tales about you, just travel. You're what movies and stories are made up of. And these things, they create these wounds that are very of course very painful, because in another previous video where I was talking about on being on human beings and on human nature and things like that, and on false authenticity that people have. Part of I was going into the whole idea of social contracts and the contract of being a social creature, a human being. And part of that is a desire to be accepted and the desire to be part of, just to be in communion with others. And being an outlier, it almost like it, it almost like it just makes it really difficult for that to for that need to be met. And depending on how, early on, or how late it is that you've learned to, or it depends on a lot of things about whether or not you've gotten those needs met. You may have eventually at some point just learn how to just be on your own, even be okay with being by yourself. Like I'm, there's a lot of us outliers who are just more than okay with being by ourselves. Being alone isn't a problem. Being, the issue comes from being harassed, being targeted, being, you know, treated harshly just because we exist. That's where the problem comes from. Being alone isn't an issue for outliers. What's really the issue is, well, when you get older and things like that, being alone isn't the issue. The issue becomes the hostility. Um, and I just want to talk a bit more about that. Especially being an outlier from the perspective of a woman and a woman of color at that. Because, complexity isn't really assigned to women. Complex men, there's plethora of literature on that. When men are weird, when men are outliers in any type of way, shape, or form, the system is just, you got Asperger's, you got, autism. Like the system just really is really good at just pinpointing uniqueness in males. But when a woman is unique, when a woman is an outlier, that is just it's practically unacceptable from birth. As a woman, you're really assigned a role in society, and you gotta fit that mold, especially when it comes to just socializing. You really gotta fit that mold, and if you do not, the system, you just fall below the cracks. There's all these stories, or there's all these reports about how girls with ADHD, autism, Asperger's, and all of that we're just those girls are underreported on because yeah, the way we're raised and the way that the world kind of treats you when you're an outlier female is just very it's just really it's really harsh. Outliers are all treated harshly, but once again, being an outlier female is just really there's a reason that all those witches were burned at the stake. People are just very hostile um, towards women in society when we don't fit certain molds. It's like we have to be eradicated. And being the fair, or just physiologically weaker sex, inciting fear in men, like it just kind of it just makes people feel more okay with being violent or eradicating you, because it's like yeah, you're a lesser being anyway. So and there's all this other stuff with sexism and things like that that goes into it, but I'm not here to go into that. It's just when you're an outlier, you kind of act like one of those funhouse mirrors for people. When you go to the funhouse and you look in the mirror and your reflection is kind of flipped upside down, you know, um, and people just have a real problem, or they just refuse to see, you know, themselves as kind of like, they just kind of refuse to see themselves as the person who's looking at you weird instead of you being the issue. They refuse to see themselves as the issue. Instead, they make you the issue. When being different isn't an issue, it's just a state of being. Um, And this also goes back to that tales thing about you, about how you just become the stuff of stories. When you're an outlier, people are just looking for so many narratives. Oh my gosh. They will ascribe to you any and everything. And, and if you are just in this place where you're just like rejecting people's advances and you're rejecting people's labels and you're just rejecting people's insanity, people become very hostile, and then they'll just start making up all these terrible stories about you, to make up all these terrible ideas about you, because it's just a way for them to recover their ego, the wounds to their ego, or it's all about them, honestly. And I say this every video, and I'll say it in this one. And that is that whatever abuses you've gone through is 9.99999 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with the abuser. It's everything to do with them. It's literally all about them. It's not about you. Um, and I don't say that to just palate your, or just to caress your breast, or to stroke your dick or anything like that. That's, it's just true. I'm sorry, psychological abuse, physical abuse, things like that just aren't, especially the kind of abuse that I go into on this channel, narcissistic abuse and gang stalking or harassment from flying monkeys. Like, that's just not, once again, that's just an uncommon, unusual, and cruel form of punishment. And you don't deserve that. Like, literally no one does. And there's just, especially as just being an outlier, like, there's no reason for you to be put through forms of narc abuse, or um, put through, forms of psychological abuse and warfare, um, by parties with more power and things like that, or greater access to power to exercise that over you. You don't deserve that. But unfortunately, you are on the receiving end of it, especially if you're an outlier that's been discovered. Um, and and oh my goodness, some of y'all are gonna hate me for this, but all of your faves, all of your what's the word I'm looking for? All of your narc abuse channel faves, like that you guys have. I don't really fuck with them because ugh, just the narc abuse, kind of I used to a certain degree, but the reason, part of why I felt the need to make this channel is because of the fact that I feel like so many people use the term narcissist as kind of like a whistle, or as a dog whistle term, to just sick crowds on to certain people, or to just sick. It's just a way to just it's just a hot button term right now. And it's a way to quickly rally a crowd around a perceived enemy or perceived threat, and just kind of turn off their thinking and immediately turn on their attack, mode and things like that. Put them into fight mode. Yeah, it's just a dog whistle term, and I don't fuck with that. Um, And not only that, but people have just oversaturated, like, people, there are certain, many of your favorite channels for narc abuse, they've gone, and I've honestly, sometimes I think that they're narcissists because of the fact that it's like they're muddying the term. These people have found ways to just kind of dilute and almost make it, just dilute and almost make meaningless that term, to the point where any and everyone is a narcissist. And it's just like, just because you have a conflict with someone, just because people, it's almost as if people don't know how to recognize conflict versus abuse. Conflict is just it's just something that happens. Conflict happens. And when someone doesn't like you, they tend to do some really bitch shit to you. Now, someone making a bitch move or doing some bitch shit because they don't like you, that doesn't make them a narcissist. That just makes them a fucking bitch. Um, I said bitch a lot. Sorry. But it's to this point where literally anytime someone has conflict with someone else, and I get it, as a human being, when you don't like someone, or when you're ever engaging in conflict with somebody, especially when you don't have other problems going on in your life, you just kind of overvalue or ascribe more value or intensity to the problems that you are dealing with, even if they're not really that big of a deal. Like it's to the point where people are basically ascribing greater value to rate of negative value to the people and the interact and the conflicts that they're having in their life, because they just because it just makes them it just makes it, once again, it just makes it easier for the mind to process. Like I said before, or what I wrote in the description box about how the mind, it really doesn't like outliers. The mind is attracted to black and white. It wants things to be in or out. It wants things to be categorized. And you're either all good or you're all bad. Like that's just something very easy for the mind. Seeing things in gray, seeing things with a bit more complexity, like that's just not something that the mind normally appreciates or normally gravitates towards. So what you have here are people who are, first of all, their anger or their, the uncomfortable feelings that they're getting from their disagreement that they have with someone, or their, just differences in being that they have with, another person. Not only is that putting them in a more, activating their lizard brain a bit more, but in addition to that, you also have, you just also have you have the shutdown of their more logical side and the activation of the more animal side, and then you have, just that you just have that, you have that and then they have their problem, that they're facing. And it's just so easy to sit there and just ascribe the most the worst word in the world you can use to just ascribe to describe whoever is, making you uncomfortable, even if it's just a minor discomfort when you really think about it. And I always think about this with my, my aunt or whatever, who I was living with, despite the fact that I was, practically 100%, compliant with her. And I was a decent, good kid. Like I was a good kid. I was a great kid. I was an easy kid. I was very, I just wasn't any trouble. But the thing about, once again, like I said in the previous video, the thing about being close to perfect or not being in any real trouble is that anytime you do become a bit of trouble, or anytime you do step outside of or you do make a little bit of trouble, it becomes magnified times 10. You drop a bit of yellow paint on an image full of, on a rainbow shirt, that's not really that big of a deal. But you drop a little bit of mustard on your all white, gown. That's a pretty fucking, it just magnifies the issue becomes magnified. And so when you have, and this has happened to me with other people, and someone, like it's just part of being, human, to be honest. When you are, yeah, when you meet people that are close to perfect or things like that, people just kind of we just kind of have an issue with them, because it's like, first of all, no one's ever going to be perfect in this life. But when you're closer to it than other people are, or when you're just, when you're easier to deal with than most of the people are, it's like when you finally aren't, when you're finally just being human, you're dealing with your normal human limitations, it just becomes magnified. And unfortunately, if you've ever grown up in an environment where, people just don't recognize that, you're probably, like me, have had to deal with your minor inconveniences being treated like the ends of the world. Like my aunt would literally treat it. I remember one time I had a soda that I didn't finish and I put it in the fridge. And because I put an unfinished soda in the fridge, there was like this note on the fridge that was like, "You're gonna get kicked out of the house if you don't learn to clean up after yourself." And it's just like, what the fuck? And to be fair, that was something that was left on a note when she was, towards the end of my stay with her. I was staying with her from, like the middle of my teenage years until the very beginning of my adult years. And by that time, conflicts and, that was probably just her, just because of the needle, breaking the camel's back. That was probably just her in her, just later stages of annoyances and things like that. But at the end of the day, in all my years of living with her, we really it's just the conflicts we've had with each other just haven't been they've just been nothing major, absolutely nothing major. So every time I performed a minor inconvenience in her life, it would become this major thing. That was just almost like it was like a breaking like and then that's also when you know that that's when you begin to realize that that something isn't about you, it's about that person. You know, whenever people say the way people treat you isn't about, it's rarely about you, but about how it's about them, you know? Um, Whenever your minor inconveniences become these big things, that's when you know someone is dealing with decades or years of whatever unresolved trauma that they have. Now that I'm in a more mature state, I recognize that my aunt, she more than likely has had to deal with years and decades of other bullshit. And me being this docile little girl, like I was just this perfect, whipping doll. I was just this perfect, just, source of, I was just, and I won't say whipping dog because not like she abused me in any way, shape, or form. It's just living with her. She was just always, just always at the tip of. It's like she just kind of, any minor inconvenience from me was like, almost like the end of the world or some shit. And yeah, that just and looking back, in retrospect as an adult, I can see now that she was just dealing with her own demons and things like that, and and yeah, whatever. But yeah, I say all that to say that yeah, if you're ever in a situation where your minor inconveniences are bothering someone, or even if you're someone who's the minor inconveniences that someone else is creating in your life is just sending you reeling, like that's just an accumulation. That's a sign of an accumulation of stress, an accumulation of other issues, and you're getting closer to your breaking point. Um, Now, normally this would happen when you're much older, when you're much older, because normally over a lifetime, especially if you've lived a normal regular life, it takes damn near 30-40 years for all those stressors of life to really begin accumulating. Give me 1 second. But yeah, when you're a target of narcissistic abuse or gang stalking, your abusers are typically trying to age you more rapidly. And so what they do is they put you through a series of events that are just going to um, induce, more rapid evolving of to just kind of rapidly just age you, just rapidly um, just make you face issues that just might have taken 40 years for you to face, but instead they're trying to make you face it in your deal with those issues in your 20s. And this is kind of what makes gang stalking so fucking insidious, and this is what kind of makes narcissistic abuse so insidious, especially when it's done on someone so young. Is it's like they're trying to turn you into a senile old person, um, while you're in the prime of your life. And this is because and this is part of the abuse. This is part of the psychological abuse. They just want to turn you into that crappy old person because they want you to be miserable. I made a video before talking about how they want you to waste your life so that you wake up one day going, oh my goodness, what happened to my life? I used to be, and I used to, and they want you to just be miserable. And part of making you miserable is just making you, like waste some of the best years of your life. And then they put you through these traumatic experiences, and then they invalidate the fact that you're going through these experiences and all this other bullshit. And it's just to accumulate more and more stress in you. It's just to accumulate more and more it's just to, like I said, just rapidly age you. Now, now when you're being gang stalked, because you're an outlier, that's just kind of the rule book that they're following. This is all about trying to it's just all about trying to get you to it's just a way to try to get you to as early a grave as possible. That's kind of what the whole goal is. That's what the whole MO is. Just getting you to as early a grave as possible. And yeah, that's just what's been going on with society as well. Like I said, if you're a victim of gang stalking or harassment, you've more than likely, especially before 2020 or 2019, you were kind of dealing with a precursor to what's happening on a much larger level in society now. So, in society now, we have this large scale gaslighting and large scale harassment going on, and large scale just large scale bullshit, social engineering happening, that's all meant to stress out and bring to early graves all these different people in society, and they're doing that shit on purpose. So yeah, so now yes, you've been targeted. You've been dealing with people that are trying to rapidly age you, dysregulate you. You've been dealing with other wounds from being an outlier. And then on top of that, people think it's you're a monster and all this other bullshit, especially if you aren't making money. And then once again, I always say I'm going to bring up that whole sexual element when you're a woman who's a victim of gang stalking, because that's an important part too, but not this video and another video. But yeah, that plays a role in things as well. But now I'm just going to go into the whole aspect of healing and things that you can do in order to help with that. First and foremost, you're going to need to do your research. I don't know about you guys, but there's this one. I don't know about you guys, but the thing that makes certain monsters so scary, the thing that makes certain things so scary, isn't necessarily the thing itself, but your mind, the imagination. The mind creates far more fearsome and gruesome monsters than anything reality could ever bring up. So when you're dealing with gang stalking and harassment and things like that, or narcissistic abuse, not having a clear idea of what's going on or what's happening to you or who it's from, that can really fuck with you. Because you're just in the dark, it's kind of like hearing sounds, things go bumping at night, But if you take a flashlight and you look around, you'll see that, oh, that was just my bag that fell off that shelf, or oh, that sound was just one of the dishes I put on the rack, sliding over a bit. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is just a way to arm yourself. It's like a flashlight in the dark. So it's really important that you And a lot of times when you're going through the abuse, and this is kind of just what happens in general when you're dealing with really unfavorable situations, you're not really thinking about learning about it. You're not thinking about all these other things. You just want it to stop. When you're going through something you don't like, you just want it to stop. That's it. There is no planning. There's no calculation. You just want it to stop. Um, but I implore you, if you do figure out that you're a victim of gang stalking or harassment, abuse, or anything like that, that you do as much research as you can, because knowledge truly is power. And the knowledge that you gain from researching about narcissistic abuse and gang stalking and things like that, it will arm you. It will arm you, and that armor will work as a defense, because trust me, you're going to get to a point where you can literally predict the future. You can predict everything. Abusers all follow a playbook, especially when you're dealing with people that are, especially when you're dealing with gang stalking. Because at the end of the day, not everyone is a narcissist. I'm sorry, they're just not. Everyone doesn't lack empathy. Everyone isn't operating from a purely selfish, level. Everyone just isn't. The thing about flying monkeys is that these people are just taking instruction. So what you have here is, whenever you have organized crime or whenever you have organized assault happening, there's always a ringleader doling out instructions. And these people who are harassing you, all they can do is follow instructions. And because all they can do is just follow instructions, guess what? Their behavior becomes predictable. Everything becomes predictable. They always use routine. And even if they do escalate or de-escalate things, it always follows a pattern. The escalation follows a pattern. Everything just follows a pattern. And you can just figure it out, and it doesn't even fuck with you anymore. Like, literally, you become able to predict. Like, you can get on a plane and know that such and such and such is going to happen. You can sign up for a class and know who is going to be in that classroom and what's going to happen in that class throughout the year. You can you just know. You can go visit family and just know what's going to happen. You just know. And that knowledge really helps you out. So the first step to healing is getting knowledge. You have to do the research. Do the research. Do it, do it, do it. And you're going to feel pain and anguish and all that stuff, but then it's just all going to evaporate and be released. Because there's something about, it's kind of like in those little Greek mythology stories where if you solve my riddle, I will open a door for you. If you solve the puzzle, if you figure out the pattern, it kind of just releases, it just really mitigates the effects of the abuse. It just dramatically mitigates it. Another thing that you can do is, if you're a victim of gang stalking, I really don't recommend it. But something I did years and years and years before I was a target of gang stalking was I journal. Now, if you're not a target of gang stalking, I say go ahead, keep a journal. If you're just being narcissistically abused, you know who your abuser is, and they don't have access to intimate details of your life, and they're not living with you or anything like that. Like, there's a clear boundary. Go ahead and journal or whatever. But I just really don't recommend it, especially in this day and age of surveillance. But yeah, if you're a victim of gang stalking, I do not recommend journaling. Don't journal. I still do sometimes, but I'm about to stop that too. Or if you do journal, keep it keep it to the point where it's practically nothing. But yeah, I don't journal. I don't really do it as much as I used to. It just doesn't feel the same. It's not the same. When you're a victim of gang stalking, they like to use what you write down and here's the thing though, if you are going to journal, you can use it as a tool. Like at 20 years old, I realized that my journals were being weaponized against me. And so what I did was I trolled my abusers with my journals. I literally would write the most random bullshit, and then they would try to pattern that bullshit. And all I would do is just have a chuckle to myself. It kind of just made me, I just had laughs and things like that. A lot of times I bring up the fact that some people have been going through this shit for like 30 years or 40 years. And I'm just like, geez Louise, after 3 years, I'm pretty much like, I'm moving on with my life. And part of that is just because of the fact that I fed my abusers. They were following so closely everything I was writing down that I could just feed them bullshit. And it just, and it's like they don't really know who I am, or they don't really have an idea about me. And that's helped. But once again, once again, when people can't pinpoint you, when they realize that they've been, fucked with, or when they can't, when they realize that you turn their game on them, that incites anger and rage and all these other abusive things, and it just makes them want to, it just makes them view you as, even more of a monster and things like that, or something to be eradicated, and that'll make them angry and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, fuck them. If they didn't want to get trolled, they shouldn't have been reading your journals. But yeah, you can use it as a source for trolling, but don't use it as a source for actual yeah, be careful what you write. um Another step towards healing is getting away from the internet. Right now, all media sources are being used as a medium for transmuting fear, anger, aggression, and a whole host of other things. The internet is literally just turning into a cesspool. And what's great about the internet is that you get to decide, kind of what shows up on your feed for the most part, and you just get to curate what you see. But even with that being said, every now and then something goes viral and it just pops up on your feed. But I really recommend that you just really extremely tight-fistedly get tight-fisted with your attention, and remove as much social media from your life as you can, because it's turning into a cesspool. And social media is just being used as a tool to radicalize certain groups or certain youth, and find them, radicalize them, and then, turn them into an agent of chaos. And I talked about that before in previous videos. Look at my Agent of Chaos videos. But yeah, the internet is just not it's being used as a weapon, especially right now. Especially right now. And all it's doing is just propagating fear and psychosis and other bullshit. And especially as someone who's dealing with gang stalking or narcissistic abuse, your nervous system is already dysregulated. Your vagus nerve is already fucked with. You're already being you're already under lots of stress. And going ahead and looking at all that bullshit online while you're dealing with all your stress, that's just going to magnify your the stress you're feeling and just take you to an earlier grave. That's all it's going to do. It's just going to give you more lines and wrinkles and a fucked up system. So just turn that shit off. Another aspect to healing, I just want to make this point. It's extremely hard to heal from a situation, a very shitty situation that that you didn't do anything to deserve it, but you're in it anyway. Um, this is especially the case, as a it's just it's just extremely hard to move on from injustices. When you are when you are just hit with the life, when you're constantly, it's one thing to have it happen once or twice, but to just be constantly back to back, constantly hit with all these different just to have this constant onslaught of system dysregulating abuse being directed towards you, that would drive anybody insane. That would make anyone go crazy. That would harm anyone. And so I really want to take the time to, and once again, your abusers are going to do this thing where they're constantly putting you through this shit and then telling you to smile and be happy. And that's just a way to invalidate your concerns and your fears and your what you're going through. And the invalidation is part of the crazy making. And once again, in my other previous video about them thinking that they know what's best for you, it also has to go back to just the whole, if Yeah, I feel like a lot of victims of gang stalking and abuse, these are people are, who might have been, suicidal, or people who might have been, you know, um, who might have, had other things going on in their life, and these people have been trying to, target you, kind of almost as if trying to give you a reason to be mad, or give you, what are you upset for? You live in a, first world country, and you have your basic needs met. What are you upset about? What could you possibly be upset for? It's just kind of that whole, I'll give you a reason to cry if you're looking for one. And it's just, once again, just that whole power, it just, excuse me, just once again goes to all of that whole, just that power struggle. People trying to get power over you, people trying to force you into a dependent, animal like, infant like state of where you're just this broken shell of the former person that you were, and you need all of this, guidance, you need all this help, you need all this, you're constantly licking your wounds. you know um, a lot of people are going to sit there and invalidate you and shame you and do all this shit to try and make you feel some type of way about being, dysregulated about by the very real abuse that you've been going through. And another thing is, these people will sit there and pretend like they're not putting you through this abuse. Like, if your family is a part of it, they'll literally sit there and pretend like they're not part of it. Like, it's the most grossest thing ever. Um, and yeah, and I'm sitting there watching my family. Like, I don't know if they thought that I would honestly just reach a point where I'm just like, well, I can't believe what I see anymore, or well, I can't believe what I feel. No, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm never going to distance myself from reality. I'm never going to part ways with reality. My heart and my mind are never going to be in conflict. This house is not divided, and that's honestly the crux of healing, and the crux of the abuse. Gang stalking and narcissistic abuse is a form of abuse that's meant to divide your house. And by house, I mean your internal house. It's meant to divide your heart and your mind. It's meant to divide your gut and your mind. It's meant to isolate all these different variables in your body that have kept you alive and kept you fully functioning and kept you healthy. And then it's trying to attack those systems because they're divided from each other. But healing, and you're journeying towards healing, you're going to need to regroup your house. You're going to need to rebuild your house. You've had people throwing stones in the glass windows. You've had people taking axes to the door. You've had people trying to burn the thing down. That's all what narcissistic abuse and gang stalking is. It's just a way to destroy your house. And your healing, what you're going to have to do is rebuild and repair your foundation in your home. That's what you're going to have to do. And once again, part of repairing your home and that foundation, and fixing it up, is not consuming inflammatory media, making sure that you eat well, and I don't mean eat well as in buy prepackaged foods and all that other shit, or eat out a lot. No, don't do that. That's actually eating poorly. What you need to do is you need to go to Dr. Berg, Dr. Drberg. He's a wonderful nutritionist on here. You need to look at his nutritional information that he has so much of. And you need to go ahead and make sure that you are getting all of your vital nutrients from as pure sources as you can. And whatever you can't get from pure sources, even if you can, I still recommend getting supplements in order to supplement your diet. You need to take care of your physical health, because your physical health takes care of your mental health. It's like it's all connected. And you'll start to mentally feel better when you just give yourself a fighting chance to psychologically heal from your psychological wounds when your body is in a more balanced state. And that's another reason why this is so important, is because the stress depletes your body of your vital nutrients. Stress depletes your body of core minerals that you have inside of you. And what that does is it lowers your immune system. So it makes it like something as simple as a little, a virus can just sit there and really take you out. Once again, when I was talking about how minor inconveniences tend to, for people that are set off by minor inconveniences, what that typically is a sign of is accumulated stress and accumulated issues and all these other things. It's the same thing with your body. Minor infections and things like that, shit like COVID can really take you out if you don't have if your immune system is compromised. And one of the ways to compromise an immune system is through stress. And trust me, I know if you are being put through narcissistic abuse or gang stalking, your body is under inhumane amounts of stress. Absolutely inhumane amounts of stress. And then if you got the jab, you were probably even a greater degree of immunocompromise and things like that. And it's just a way for them once again to just kill off people sooner than later. And this is the reason why I say even if you can get your vital nutrients met, your B's, your B12s, your C, D, K, potassium, and all of that, especially potassium. Potassium is going to be very important. Especially if you're having muscle spasms or things like that. If you're noticing that, get some potassium in you. But the reason why all this is so important is because of the fact that it's just because of if you notice what feels like heart palpitation, or if your chest feels tight or things like that, it's probably because your vagus nerve has been dysregulated, and you're going to want to do research into that. But deep breathing and reducing your stress, you have to do it. You have to. And part of that is going to require a little bit of social isolation and a bit of social media isolation as well, curating your feed. And the social isolation part, you just kind of just have to do that until you feel strong enough to go back out into the public and things like that. And there will come a time when you are strong enough, trust me. Like I said, these people, these abusers, especially when they do it in a group, these abusers all have to follow commands. They all have to follow a pattern. And eventually you figure out that pattern. So even if they scale it up or scale it down, at the end of the day, you recognize the pattern. So it doesn't matter how they scale it or which way they scale their abuse. It's just all, at the end of the day, it's all part of the pattern. It's kind of like when you're learning math concepts and you learn about this and then you learn about the next concept and how it's related to that. And it's just all part of it's just all part of that. So yeah, getting your vital nutrients, that is extremely key. You have to do that part. You have to. Eat better. You really have to eat better. You really have to take care of your health and yourself. Ignoring the cues from your body, ignoring those, like I said, in another previous video, and just in this video too, about them trying to rapidly age you and put you in a place where it's almost like you're in your 40s or 50s while you're in your 20s and your teens and 20s. Like this is what that's what psychologically abuse is trying to do to your body. That's what the COVID vaccine and the shot and the vaccine and the disease kind of did. Is it was a way to rapidly age people. And by that, I mean it was a way to give people things like hypertension and deplete you of your vital nutrients at a much more rapid rate than you otherwise would have happened. And that was done to, once again, age you quicker so that you could just die off sooner. It's kind of like a way to just silently kill off a bunch of people without raising an army, So it's really important that you do things in order to, like, it's literally life or death. You taking care of your health is literally life or death at this point. And you working on ways to reduce your stress, either by isolating or by, getting away from your devices. That's really important. Because right now what we have is just this war on productivity and this war on this war on conscientiousness, this war on it's just the most ridiculous shit going on right now. And you don't want to be caught you just want to outlast. That's the key right now. The key is to just last. It's just to outlast. And this is going to go on for another 5 years, maybe. And in that time, you really need to just focus on healing. Like all of your attention should be towards nurturing yourself and getting money, nurturing and money. And by that, I mean skilling up. and things like that. But the thing about this narcissistic abuse, once again, it's really hard to skill up when you are constantly being targeted or you're constantly being psychologically fucked with, because that exhausts you. That literally mentally exhausts you. And that's the whole point of this. Another point of this. It's just to mentally exhaust you so that you are once again dependent on state. Just dependent on the state for assistance, but the state isn't going to give you assistance. And so not only are you stressed out from all the abuse you're going through, but then you're stressed out. Not only are you dealing with existential stress, but then you're dealing with actual stress. And they do this shit on purpose. And I'll go into more details about how to heal and things like that. But you just need to make sure you're getting your nutrients, de-stressing, and staying away from these assholes.